Welcome to Fazza Love. Boom, subscribe now. It began with a glance. Not the kind that passes, but the kind that stays, that lingers like moonlight, refusing to fade. Her eyes met his across a quiet evening, and in that single second, the desert seemed to still its breath. The wind slowed, the sands paused mid-whisper. Time itself hesitated, watching what destiny had already written. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her eyes carried an entire language, 1,000 untold poems, wrapped in calm, glowing silence. He saw in them not a reflection but recognition, as though his soul had finally found its mirror. Every heartbeat translated her gaze into meaning. Every breath turned her silence into verse. It wasn't love declared. It was love revealed. No promise, no word, no vow, just truth, clear as light upon still water. That night, under stars that glimmered like secrets, he learned that sometimes the heart doesn't need language to understand. It just listens to eyes that speak in eternity. He often wondered later how something so quiet could feel so infinite. Her eyes were not loud. They didn't beg to be seen. Yet, when he looked into them, he felt every unspoken confession rise and fall like a tide inside his chest. The world around them blurred. The murmurs of people, the pulse of life, all dissolved into stillness. What remained was her gaze, steady, calm, and endlessly deep. There were universes in those eyes, fragments of stars, whispers of prayers, glimmers of dreams she never dared to say aloud. When she looked at him, he felt history itself bow in reverence, as though love had finally found its echo. He realized then that words are fragile things, often lost between breaths. But eyes carry forever. They never forget. They hold the softest promises and the deepest truths. Her lips were silent, but her gaze spoke with the certainty of destiny itself. Sometimes he caught her looking away, pretending indifference, yet her eyes betrayed her heart. They softened when he spoke, brightened when he smiled, and dimmed when distance grew between them. He learned to read her the way one reads the horizon, gently, with patience, waiting for light to reveal its secrets. Each glance became a sentence, each blink a pause, each meeting of eyes a conversation older than time. He began to understand that love doesn't begin with touch or sound. It begins with awareness, with two souls seeing each other clearly for the first time. In her gaze, he saw not only affection but trust, that silent surrender that only truth can inspire. Her eyes told him everything. Her voice feared, "I'm here, I feel you, I am yours." No need for declarations. Her silence was louder than any song. Her eyes were verses he would spend a lifetime reading, over and over, never reaching the final line. When they walked through the desert together, under the quiet hum of dusk, he noticed how her eyes caught the last rays of the sun. They glowed, gold fading into brown, light surrendering to night. The dunes around them shimmered like molten glass, yet none of it shone brighter than her gaze. The wind moved softly, brushing her hair across her face, and he saw it then, the way she looked at him, the way her soul reached through silence. He didn't need to ask what she felt. He already knew. The desert was vast, but that moment was infinite. In her eyes he found home, not a place but a promise. Her glance carried warmth that no words could contain, a confession too sacred to speak aloud. He walked beside her in peace, knowing her heart had already whispered everything her lips never dared. It was enough. Her eyes had already said forever. Nights fell gently over his thoughts, and still, her eyes followed him, not in memory but in presence. He could feel them when he closed his own, glowing faintly in the darkness behind his lids, like stars waiting to guide him home. Sometimes he'd stand beneath the moon, his kandura fluttering in the wind, and feel her gaze through distance, soft, patient, eternal. It was as if her soul had found a way to live inside his. Every heartbeat carried her reflection, every silence spoke her truth. He realized then that love doesn't fade when words end. It begins where words cannot go. Her eyes had given him something beyond time, a connection that didn't need sound, only light. He could still see them, shining, alive, full of meaning. They were not eyes anymore. They were verses carved into his existence. The poetry of presence, the sacred script of what never ends. He remembered the first time she looked away, not with rejection, but with the weight of something unspoken. There was love there, hidden beneath restraint, trembling like candlelight in wind. He understood that not all hearts can bear the weight of confession, and not all love is meant to be voiced, but he also knew that her silence was not absence. It was death. Her eyes, even when averted, still reached for him through the air, bridging distance with invisible tenderness. He carried those moments like holy relics, each glance etched into his soul. When loneliness touched him, he would recall the way her gaze lingered on his hands, on his words, on his stillness, and he'd find comfort in knowing that she had spoken, just not aloud. Her eyes had said everything love ever needed to say. It was the kind of conversation that only souls can understand. Wordless, timeless, eternal. Seasons passed. The desert changed its color. The winds shifted direction, but her gaze remained alive within him. He could still recall how it felt, that quiet electricity when their eyes met under starlight. The world had boundaries, but that connection did not. It traveled through time, through thought, through every sleepless night. Her eyes had taught him how to listen to silence, how to see the unseen, how to feel love without touching it. He realized that sometimes love's truest language is not spoken at all. It's simply felt. It exists in the breath between glances, in the stillness between heartbeats, in the invisible thread that ties two spirits together. Even now, when she is far away, her eyes still guide him. He finds them in the glow of dawn, in reflections of moonlit water, in the calm rhythm of prayer. Their language was never lost. It just became eternal. He often wrote poems about her, lines that began with stars and ended with silence. But no verse ever felt complete, because how do you describe eyes that hold the whole sky? He would write of the way they shimmered when she smiled, how they softened when she looked at him, how they turned the desert into a cathedral of light. Yet every time he read his words back, he knew they fell short. Some things cannot be captured by ink. They can only be remembered by the soul. Her eyes were not just beauty, they were truth. They told him who he was meant to be. Through them he saw himself reflected, not as a prince, not as a poet, but as a man who finally understood love. He learned that her gaze was his prayer, answered, not through miracles or fate, but through recognition. Her eyes had seen him before the world ever did. Now, when he stands beneath the night sky, he no longer searches for her face. He doesn't need to. Her eyes live within every star, every shimmer of silver dust, floating above the dunes. The wind carries her gaze across the horizon, and the moon keeps its glow to remind him she once looked his way. He feels peace, not because he forgot her, but because her silence still speaks. Her eyes told him everything, how love begins, how it grows, and how it lives on even when lips go quiet. He smiles softly, knowing that love is not measured by words, but by presence, and hers never left. The memory of her eyes is not an ache anymore. It's a light, soft and endless. He looks up, whispers her name once, and lets it drift into the stars. Somewhere he knows she feels it, and her eyes, wherever they are, still tell him everything.